We hack the code and flip the tag. Where cliches come to retire. Drop that beat, turn down to fire. Say what's real, make fears take a seat. Unconventional wisdom, dancing on your feet. Hey.
Hello, and welcome to Unconventional Wisdom, about conventional wisdom. I am your host, Kim Miller-Hershon. I am so excited about my guest, Aaron Trahan, today. He's going to introduce himself, but I have already had a little bit of a conversation with him, and I know that he has some really fabulous things to share with us today. So I'm excited. All right, Aaron, it's all you.
Thank you, Kim. I am equally as excited to have this conversation. And yeah, just a quick intro about me. Leadership happened in my career much earlier than I ever would have expected. So, as I was starting my career, like most of us do out of college, I found myself being thrust into what was supposed to be a temporary role, overseeing a $100 million business division, turned into a leadership career. And that eventually led me to being able to run a $1 billion organization, publicly traded by the time I was 30. And all that really means is I'm quite confident I've made just about every single leadership and business mistake you could ever imagine. And it also opened up an opportunity for an interesting twist where I discovered the value and the impact of coaching when I hired my first coach. And as I like to say, being a recovering corporate executive, I have spent most of my entire career being on the opposite side of the table that I now find myself on, and fell in love with the transformational impact that just having that third party to be able to see things objectively and help you see things that may have been blind spots, or to see around corners that you didn't even know existed, and how that can accelerate your trajectory. So, to make a long story short, as I continue to pull on that thread, the window of opportunity opened for me to do that on a full-time basis, which is now what I do today, really helping organizations of all shapes and sizes really create the bridge that connects their vision to strategy to execution. And as the saying goes, the only mistake was I should have done this a lot sooner than I did. So we
Yeah.
are.
Yeah, Aaron, I love that in the sense of you really are now providing what I'm sure you wish you had earlier in your career, really being thrust into all of these leadership and management roles with no training. And I think it's such a value and such a gift to give to people what you wish you had. And not just that, but with the vast experience that you have had running very large organizations, which, like you said, can be translated as well to smaller orgs. But having that corporate experience is definitely a path, right? It's a thing. Yeah.
100%. Yeah, it's sometimes learning from best case scenarios isn't exactly the best learning. I think sometimes we all have to go through a little bit of adversity, having to bump our head against the wall a couple of
Mhm.
times to then be able to truly appreciate and reverse engineer a better way that just shows up for all of us as experience reps. Have enough of those reps, you're then able to translate either for teams inside of an organization and or for other organizations. I think the greatest gift that I'm sure we've all benefited from, both you and I, as well as the audience, that, sometimes when you can learn lessons that other people have learned, but avoid the same scars that they had to acquire to get them, is a pretty good return on your time and learning investment.
Oh, Aaron, I just love that. I think there is really something really profound about that. The one thing I'm going to say, and I'm curious what you think about this. I agree with you. I think that some of our best lessons, and definitely like well earned lessons, are either from the mistakes that we've made, or like you said, from somebody who's made the mistakes who can help you avoid them, or at least not fall down quite as hard. I
Mhm.
think, though, one thing that I find with clients that is really fascinating is that I think that oftentimes when we do something well or something seamlessly, we do it because we naturally are good at it. And we don't often have the mindfulness about what our process is in order to get there because you just do it. And I think some of where I take clients, depending on what it is, that sometimes the best way to correct or to reroute is to really understand how do you naturally do things well and then bring it to mindfulness and then apply that
Right.
to whatever it is that you're trying to fix.
Yeah, I love the thought and the context behind that because I think not only success, but also failure leaves clues. And sometimes we win and have success when it may have not been deserved. I hate to use a sports analogy, but sometimes you're just playing against teams that aren't as talented as you, and you barely win when you should have won by a lot more. And you know what? Sometimes we lose when, from a preparation, effort, energy standpoint, may have deserved to win. And so I think it's learning from each one of those things and not thinking you're smarter than you really are in some cases. And on the other side, maybe not treating a loss as badly or thinking you're as bad as you really are when there's much more context behind stories on either side of that. But the point I think you made is really being able to do the mindful reflecting, really being
Right.
able to go back and win or lose, what did we learn? How can we be more effective or better on the very next attempt or next week, next month? And can you create systems in place that allows you to be able to get better at getting better? Because if
Right.
we leave things up to randomness, our random inputs will always lead to random outputs. And I think in any type of business environment, that's not the type of strategy that's going to be optimal for
Right.
sustained performance over a long period of time.
And it's certainly not scalable. Can't ever replace yourself if you have no systems in place to do whatever your highest value is and hire somebody to do what you're doing if it's all just random.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Very good. All right. Speaking of random, I have a random question for you. If you could live in any movie, what movie would you live in?
Oh, that's such a great question. And not to be a bad student of dodging the question, but I'm gonna pretend like there's a book that I know for sure is gonna get made into a movie that really speaks to me here.
Okay.
And it's the book on Bill Campbell. And the book is
Oh,
titled Trillion Dollar Coach. And it really breaks down his approach into how he's helped some of the largest organizations. He was the mentor to Steve Jobs, the mentor to the Google founders, and the way that he helped and supported people into becoming the best possible versions of themselves that ultimately helped these organizations grow to huge behemoths of industry, but really taking a people first approach. He helped these technology companies become juggernauts without really being the most technical guy out there. He was a people person and he could bring people together. He could help teams and people become the absolute best versions of themselves. And yeah, I'm that's what I choose. Not quite a movie yet, but the book Trillion Dollar Coach is really something that I would see. I would love to live in.
that's so funny. You know what my answer was going to be?
What's that?
Mamma Mia. I like just want my life to be a musical.
Yeah,
And maybe a musical on a Greek island would be okay too,
there
right?
are worse places for
There
sure.
are worse places. That's right. What's very funny is that, and my kids can vouch for this, is first of all, I never know the lyrics to an entire song, but I'm really good on the chorus or like the first couple of lines. The fact that I can't sing is irrelevant to this
Right.
conversation. But I always like if you say something that reminds me of a song, I will always sing like a couple of lines of the song. What's very funny is that and I don't know if you have children, but sometimes when you just do things naturally, it's not like you're trying to create a tradition or something that gets passed down. It's just something that you do.
Right.
So I have three kids, but two of my kids have picked that up as a way of being in the world. And so we have a lot of singing in our family world.
I
It's kind
love
of
it.
funny.
Yeah. No, I've got two kids, and my oldest, my 5-year-old, is a performer. So it is not a rare occasion where he gets us up early on a Saturday morning to come into the living room so we can watch his performance. And
Okay.
like
All
you,
right.
I have zero singing talent, so I'm living vicariously through my 5-year-old in that category.
I love that. Yes. It's so funny. You know what the word that came to my mind, because this is how old I am, is I hope you are taping him, but I hope you are recording some of those performances because when he gets to be a famous, whatever famous person he's going to be, whether he's going to be an actor, a singer, like whatever it is, then you will have those little clips to share with the producers.
That's right. Look where you started.
That's right. Very cute. Okay. So obviously, not only are you a leadership coach, but you have a lot of leadership experience. And because you started in corporate America, I'm sure that in the beginning you had some notion, or people told you or modeled for you what success was going to look like and like how that needed to look. And then you've clearly broken the mold. What did you come to realize, or what do you now know is important?
Yeah, I grew up in a lot of really tough corporate cultures where it was very command and control and everybody wanted to be the alpha male and when you're 23, 24, 25 years old, you don't know any better, right? But what I did notice was when you're in that type of environment, you want to almost protect yourself at all costs, and it goes back to that failure
Mm,
success contrast that we talked about earlier. And what I noticed is as success started happening for executives around me, complacency was able to set in very quickly. All of a sudden, you want to protect this image, you want to protect
mm,
this facade that everything I touch is successful. And the ability to go out and try new things, learn new things, adapt, even if there could be some failure on the other side of that, was not prioritized. And I never understood that as I started to work my way up the corporate leadership ladder and become a more dynamic, more mature leader. I also noticed that when that happens, those leaders that were protecting themselves for the appearance of only success, they stopped learning. They stopped
mm,
growing. There was a plateauing out, and I quickly realized that I never want to be in a position where I stop learning. And even if that makes me look, for lack of a better term, stupid in some cases, as I'm on that learning curve, to never feel like you're so important or your image
mhm,
such a thing that must stay intact to where you can't go out and experiment, risk, even fail or have some
mhm,
mistakes along the way. Because when you stop getting those experience reps in, I think the big thing I learned was failure is not the opposite of success. It's an absolute critical part of the journey. And so if you're doing things
mhm,
that require zero risk and there is no failure, the one thing I started to learn was you're guaranteeing no growth and no learning. And so that was something that I was very deliberate to change the environment that I was in to not be like that because I never wanted
mhm.
to be in a position to limit growth and learning, which is absolutely a critical part of any leader.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting point. And what it brings to mind for me is one of the last, as I like to call them, JOBs that I
Mm.
had. It was an engineering firm. And as I like to say, we've just met, but me in an engineering firm, right? Like I was doing business development and marketing. So the work actually was very well suited to who I was, but the environment certainly was not,
Mm.
right? And I think I didn't have the maturity to realize that. And what happened was we had this all, it was end of 2009, beginning of 2010, where I was in engineering on the design side of major construction. The real estate market had crashed in 2008, and we were lucky to really still be afloat, right? It was a bigger company. And we're sitting around, we have an all hands meeting, and we hear there's going to be layoffs. Now, originally, I thought our office was profitable. So I wasn't sure, and there were like 22 offices. And I didn't think that our office necessarily was going to incur that risk, but they were really vague about what was happening. And I'm the one at the meeting that raises my hand to ask the question that is on everybody's mind, but nobody else has the courage to ask, which is, are we having layoffs in this office? And the response was, I wish you hadn't asked that. And I thought, I walked away thinking, okay, first of all, it's me. And second of all, and it was, right? The next day, it was me and one other person in the office. But I think the other thing was probably best thing that ever happened to me.
Right.
Because when you're in an environment that stifles you, that doesn't want to see you for who you are, is makes you be in a box and stunts learning, stunts questions. Like I think for some people that's okay, right? It fits in with who they are, and I think it's really important to say that if it fits you, then you're good. But if it doesn't, as I like to say, the universe did for me what I could not do for myself.
That's
Right.
right.
And that was history for me because that is when I started my coaching business.
I think you hit on such a critical point that is around right fit, whether an organizational fit, a culture fit, an environment fit. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen A plus talent get diluted because the fit is not right.
That's right.
So an A plus talented individual or leader never is going to have the opportunity to do their best work in one of those three: organizational, culture, environment misfits. And so it is absolutely a blessing in disguise, whether it's forced or opted into, to pull that band-aid off and get uncomfortable to go find the right fit that's going to allow anyone to be able to do much, much
Right.
better, if not their best work.
And I often say too, as I'm coaching, this might be part of what you do too, which is that as you're expanding your team, culture fit is such an interesting thing because I think often without thinking about it, we just hire people that are like us. And that's what creates the culture fit. If everybody is just like you stifle innovation. You need all the different pieces to really come up with a full picture of how it is that you move this train forward.
Nobody is great at everything.
That's right.
And you cannot develop an area or a weakness that you are unaware of. And so if you take the approach that you are good or great at everything and you're only looking to bring in people that mirror you, you could be stacking the deck to where, yes, you're hiring everyone with the same strengths, but you also may be hiring everyone with the same exact weaknesses that will show up as cracks in the foundation of an organization.
Yeah. Very well
So
said.
it's, yeah, every individual is almost like a puzzle piece. And the better that you can build the puzzle with where the pieces fit in, the stronger the organization will be.
Yeah. Okay. Another totally random, off the subject thing, but it did remind me. I saw on Instagram yesterday somebody who made a pair of jeans, a guy who like decorated a pair of jeans with puzzle pieces. And he like put them all on and then he like sewed them. And it was so cool looking while he was standing up. And all I could think about is you would just have to wear those like to go on a walk, right? Like you couldn't ever sit in those. They were very cool, but seemed more like window dressing
Right.
than substantive, which, oh, okay, Aaron, which is basically what you were talking about from your corporate experience. Lots of window dressing
Yep.
and not a lot of depth.
Right.
Oh, that was pretty good. See,
Yeah,
not
I
so
like that.
random after all.
Yeah, no, I think is it optimized for optics or for functionality? And I
Yeah,
think
very well said.
sometimes our ego will always want to optimize for optics.
Right. And it's messy, right? Being in business, us as humans, we're just messy.
It's right.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So, as a successful leader, and you ran some very large organizations, what is one thing that people assume that you've just got this all figured out, but behind the scenes, you still wrestle with?
Yeah, for me, I think it goes to the wrong applications of experience. And I've had to
Mm,
learn some lessons the hard way here is yes, you may have a very successful track record. You may have the experience in all these different areas, but I don't think, and I see this too much, I was guilty of this. You can't expect that experience to make you the subject matter expert forever. Things
mm,
change, things evolve, and there's such a dynamic contrast between experience gained and the openness to continue to receive constructive feedback.
ah,
And I've had to catch myself in this over the years of thinking that I've got it all figured out, whether it's around strategy, whether it's around leadership, whether it's around operations. There's very few things that are happening the same way today as they did 10 years ago, 5 years ago. The next five
hmm,
years ahead of us will probably be even more radically different than the way the world looked in the prior 5 years. And so someone on the outside may look at a given track record or a given body of experience and assume they've got it all figured out. The warning with that, and I like to try to remind myself as many times a day as I possibly can when I look myself in the mirror, is don't ever think that experience in the past will always be applicable to subject matter expertise
hmm,
in the future. We all need to make sure we have the right constructive feedback loops coming in to ensure
right.
that we're able to adapt and get better. And
Hmm.
for me, that's one of the reminders that I wrestle with myself is do I, regardless of what's happened in the past, yesterday, last month, do I have the right amount of constructive feedback loops coming in, giving me the information to be able to
Hmm.
pinpoint how I can improve?
Oh, I love that. It reminds me, so I have a team of three
Mm,
people, and on the one hand, I feel like I'm good about asking for feedback.
yes,
Here's though, I think the important part of that is can't ask it once and think that you've done your job and now you've opened the door and they'll just
checkbox.
that's right. Check that box, and now they'll just come to you and say whatever it is,
Mm,
right? I think you really said it, and I really agree with this, which is the constant feedback loop. It's the asking the question in a lot of different ways continuously. And I think also modeling, giving constructive feedback to my team.
that's right.
And so that there is a space for that. One of the exercises that I often use is called a user manual to me. When you bring somebody new onto your team, every employee wants to know how to please their boss, right? I think it's a really interesting foundation to set for somebody to say, okay, new employee, how can I communicate best with you? What is it that I should never say to you? And it also creates the feedback loop that is separate from job performance.
That's right.
Yeah. So I think that it's very effective, even if people roll their eyes at it, because I have that happen too.
Yeah, you make such great points there. And that's why, for me, is what jumped out top of mind, especially at the back end of your question around what am I still wrestling with? And I don't care how many people love feedback. When you get some constructive feedback, we all have egos. It's going to make you feel a certain way. And that's why I've seen this strange, but not so strange phenomena that the more success a leader has, the more they want to hear the things that they want to hear, things that they need to hear. And so the thing that I always wrestle with, of kind of fighting that ego on a day in, day out basis, is am I listening and am I getting the feedback loops of the things I need to hear
Ah,
that will make me better? And it's going to feel good. Doesn't mean it's going to give me a warm and fuzzy feeling. It may hurt and bruise the ego, but I'm optimizing for getting better.
yeah.
And
Oh,
so,
Aaron, so good. That
yeah.
is just, yeah, I love that. All right. So, if you could rewrite the rule book on leadership, what's one outdated belief? I'm going to do that again because I froze for a second there. Okay. So, if you could rewrite the rule book on leadership, what's one outdated belief that you would throw away? And then what would you replace it with?
Yeah. So what comes up for me here is around the vanity and the celebratory just accolades that we want to throw towards growth, and most especially rapid
Mm,
growth. Even one of the most famous business leader, Mark Zuckerberg of Meta, in the early days of Facebook, had a mantra of move fast and break things. It was almost like we've gone through this era of if you had a high growth rate, you were celebrated. You are the prince of your industry. And I can't tell you how many businesses I've seen get in trouble for chasing
mm,
after the vanity metric of revenue growth. And look, I'm in business. I'm not going to sit here and say that revenue is not important. But what I am going to say is revenue growth at all cost doesn't work. And we've seen the graveyard become full of companies that grew too fast, too quickly, and were not able to manage it. And it ultimately ended up being the very thing that killed their companies. And so I really want to rewrite this outdated belief that as long as you grow and you're growing your
mm.
revenue, everything will take care of itself. And I've just seen time and time again, that's not always the case. Sometimes it may require a little bit of discipline to make sure you're growing in a smart way that can be sustained, that you can generate profitability and cash flow from, because that's what your employees are going to depend on. And
Right.
I can't tell you how many times I've been called in to help address a situation where an organization has a record revenue month only to stress about making payroll the very next month because the type of growth they were chasing after wasn't good for the company. So
Right.
that's a rule I would like to rewrite is the growth at all cost or only focusing on revenue growth, in fact, not be in the best interest of your organization from a one-dimensional standpoint.
I like that. And I think the other thing that it also, that thought triggers for me is how you burn out your people.
There's so many people problems that show up along the way. It's hard to retain people. It burns people out. The amount of chaos that ensues. Back to Mark
Right.
Zuckerberg's quote, what happens when you break everything and all of a sudden you've got to shift the entire company towards fixing things instead of growing? And yeah,
Right.
it's just, it's created so much more harm than it has
Mhm.
any when all you're doing is chasing after the vanity metric of how fast you're growing.
Right. Oh, I think that's a really meaningful statement. I just agree with you. And I think it's a very thoughtful way of looking at it. So, what's one unconventional habit or mindset shift that's helped you grow your business?
Yeah, I think for me, it was the mindset shift that I really experienced throughout my entire leadership career is I can look back and say, almost reverse engineer my mindset. And if I would have believed this much earlier,
Mm,
so many problems could have been avoided. And it is around this growing and scaling of an organization. And I think a lot of leaders, the mindset shift that I want to respectfully recommend is just the understanding that you can't scale a team, an organization or a business over the long term faster than you scale yourself.
Mm.
So, what that means is there's so many leaders that are trying to grow and scale their businesses when, as Peter Drucker has famously said, the bottlenecks are usually found at the top of the bottle. So if a leader is not scaling themselves, if they're not working on growing and developing not only themselves, but the teams around them, you're just creating more bottlenecks. You're getting stuck in the business. And I help leaders based on my own experience of what I didn't do in my corporate leadership was not zooming out to realize enough, how do I need to scale myself? How can I set up my team to be able to take on substantially more? Because if I
Right.
don't or I can't, then the business is not going to grow. It's not going to be able to scale. It ultimately all comes down to people. And if you can't position your people on a path towards being able to scale themselves and take on more responsibility, it's going to be impossible to scale the business.
Yeah, very well said. Like, mic drop. Excellent. Okay. Actually, last question. Many leaders have imposter syndrome or self-doubt. And so I'm where that comes up for you. And what do you do about it?
I love this one. And my approach here may be, I guess, what's considered a hot take or slightly controversial. When I think about imposter syndrome, and whenever I've experienced it, whenever I've had teammates experience it as I was leading teams, I met them with a response to anything resembling imposter syndrome with a bit of a surprising response, which is simply, congratulations. Good. I'm glad we're experiencing imposter syndrome because I want you to think for a second. Think about the opposite end of the spectrum of imposter syndrome and what shows up. What shows up on that opposite end of the spectrum is you're operating basically out of pure comfort. You know everything that's going to happen like the back of your hand, and you are firmly stuck in the comfort zone. And I don't need to preach to your audience, but we all know that there is no growth that happens inside the comfort zone. So for me, the
Right.
end of the spectrum from imposter syndrome is being so comfortable where there's no risk, there's no stress. You can predict everything that's going to happen. And so with imposter syndrome, in a lot of cases, all that really means is the uncomfortability that comes from traveling through uncharted waters. Congratulations, you're in the growth zone. I kind of like to joke around and saying, every job I've ever had, I wasn't properly qualified for. There was a lot of sink or swim and learning how to swim with the experience on the job, but that accelerates growth. The one
Mhm.
caveat I will say is the area where you should have imposter syndrome is if in fact you had to lie or defraud people to get to the position that you're in. If that happened, then I would say the imposter syndrome is well warranted because you lied to be able to get to where you're at. But if it's simply because you're maybe a bit out over your skis or you're dealing with uncomfortable situations, you're leading bigger groups or teams than you ever have before and you're unsure and uncertain, that's those are all just the rent that's due to.
Mhm.
And I think instead of thinking of it as a completely negative stigma, I like to respectfully challenge people to embrace it, celebrate it. You're growing, you're in
Right.
growth mode. As
Right.
long as you didn't lie to get there, it's all good.
Yeah, Melissa Urban, who is the founder of Whole 30, she just put out a video which I thought was really interesting and I think relevant to what you're talking about. And because I think a lot of people's approach would be, oh, just say the affirmation, right? I got this. I'm strong. I'm powerful. I'm able to do this, right? I can lead this team. I can have success. And she said something really interesting that what happens for a lot of people when you are in that self doubt space is that your unconscious mind is going to call BS on that. If you are really in a tizzy. And she suggested doing a what if you were strong and powerful, which I just loved. What if you ran this team successfully?
Yep.
What if you made the best hire? What if your business actually got to the level of growth, right? Your mind is now searching for evidence of what is possible for you.
Right.
Yeah, I thought it was just brilliant.
I love that. And I think so much, especially around self-doubt, is don't let self-doubt prevent a bias for action. And so much of the doubt and the fear that we are facing mentally is all due to the uncertainty of what happens
That's
under
right.
a wide variety of different scenarios. When you
Right.
take action, you found out pretty quickly. And a lot of times we're treating fear and uncertainty and doubts that may have a 2% chance of happening, we're treating it like it's the 99%. And I love
Right.
the quote from Alex Hormozy and his wife, Layla Hormozy, when they talk about this. And they say, we think about self doubt and fear. In our minds, it almost looks like this big, vast, deep ocean until something happens. We take the first step and we realize all we're looking at is a big pond that's not even 6 inches deep that we could easily walk across. But if
Right.
we don't take that step, we're left thinking about all this uncertainty and all this
Right.
fear when sometimes just a bit of action to take a step forward, it's the greatest thing ever to dissipate that doubt and fear once you
Right.
realize that 1% worst case scenario didn't come close to happening.
Right. And then I think the other thing, and I think I've actually said this on the podcast before, but it is worth repeating because it's so good, which is that I think the next step is to say to yourself, you know what? Your future self will know how to deal with whatever comes next. And you have evidence that is true for you, right? Success, failure, whatever, you're here, right? Like you got this, right? And so worrying about that 1%, the what if, like just saying to yourself, listen, your future self will know what to do. You'll be there, you'll get there. So just put one foot in front of the other and take the action.
And I think we all have to acknowledge that there is no perfect.
There you go.
We all want the clouds to part and to somebody to show up with a roadmap on a silver platter of saying, this is the perfect step. This is the perfect move. This is the perfect strategy. But I always come back to the competence confidence loop. And so if we just acknowledge that there is no perfection in any action we take, is going to have a degree of imperfection to it. But what happens? With every action and every step, we gain slightly more competence in an area, which increases our confidence in that area, that then circles back to allow us to take another imperfect step. And you can get the loop spinning faster and faster for you. But it starts with acknowledging that I know I'm not going to be perfect. I know
Hmm.
there's no perfect step, but I'm going to learn and increase competence on the other side of this step.
I think that is actually a perfect thought to end our discussion with because you just really, I think, given so much wisdom today. Again, from your corporate experience, from your coaching experience, clearly a growth minded individual. You walk the walk, Aaron. And to me, that is what it is all about.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Love having this conversation with people like you, Kim, who can relate and help others tap into their next level growth.
Yeah, I love that. You have been listening to Unconventional Wisdom about conventional wisdom, where cliches come to retire and fresh thinking we inspire. And I am super inspired by Aaron today. I hope you have been too. In fact, I know you have been. And Aaron, just again, really appreciate your time and your wisdom. And I would say to you on listeners that you will be able to contact Aaron. You'll see it in the show notes. And Tell people about the podcast, share it, download it. You know all the stuff you need to do. And we will see you next time. Go out there and be a better human.
Where cliches